Joining me now are New York Times Pentagon correspondent Helene Cooper and New York Times Chief White House correspondent Peter Baker. Peter, you've reported from war zones in the past. The danger is always there. You were, I believe, in Chechnya. I know you were in Afghanistan in the early days of that war. This comes as a shock. And I just want to read for you something that was just said at the United Nations by their UN ambassador. We regret any people who die in conflict, but I'd like to make two clarifying points. First, he wasn't a journalist, says the UN ambassador from Russia. That was something that the New York Times itself stated. And on the internet, there's information circulating that other part of his actions were not actually journalistic activity. It was actually filmmaking. And that's open access. That's information. I just want to put that on the record. A media critic, the UN ambassador from Russia.
You know, I never had the great honor of meeting Brent Renaud, but he made a point of his courageous work long before Ukraine. And I think that the sad thing here is he's the first foreign journalist to die in this conflict. But if history teaches us anything, he will not be the last. And of course, he was a journalist. Filmmaking is a form of journalism. It is bringing home truth to the world, truth that the Russians clearly don't want to have out there. Remember, the Russians, of course, have shut down their own independent media. They have made it a crime, punishable by 15 years in prison, to simply use the word war to describe the war. So I think their version of media criticism should be remembered in that context. And you know, you're right. I've been in war zones a long time ago. Helene, I know, has. You should ask her sometime about being run over by a tank. I mean, but our colleagues who are there now, the ones who are on the ground, and they're taking their lives in their hands every day, every hour. It's never safe. There's no such thing as a safe place in a war zone. And they're doing it to bring home truth. And I guess I think about this a lot, Andrea, because in the last few years, Americans have been bombarded with messages about enemies of the people and fake news, all this maligning of the media. And there are these people on the ground risking their lives to bring truth home. And I just think that the Brent Renaud situation reminds us of how courageous and important that work really is.
You know, and the work that many of our friends and colleagues did in Syria and in Iraq and Afghanistan. Richard Engel and our colleagues right now in Ukraine. And Helene, a lot of journalists, myself included, thought that, well, being in Lviv, being in Western Ukraine was, quote, relatively safe. Well, from a cruise missile attack now we know, and the attack that killed 35 people in that military base 11 miles from the border of Poland, there is no safe place in Ukraine.
No, there isn't, Andrea. And I would like to just take I mean, Peter did a good job of knocking down this Russia's UN ambassador ridiculous statement, but that he also misquotes the New York Times, because the New York Times certainly did not say that Brent Renaud was not a journalist. We said that he actually was once worked for the New York Times and was not on a particular assignment in Ukraine for the New York Times. He was actually there for Time magazine. So in the world of Russian misinformation, this one is certainly a doozy. You know, this is sort of the horrifying and sad part of reporting and covering war zones. We all have, you do too. Andrea, you've been in war zones. We all have our colleagues who we're also worried about right now in Ukraine, all over the country. I know you feel that, you feel the same way. And it's just the reality of covering, bringing these stories of what's happening and what's happening on the civilian front, what's happening to the people of Ukraine, back to an American audience. To a global audience. The world needs to see what is happening. That Vladimir Putin is certainly at war with journalism, since he shut it down. He shut down all these media outlets in Russia, and the Russian people are not at this moment seeing what's happening in Ukraine, but the world is. And that is thanks to these very courageous colleagues of ours who are on the ground there, putting their own lives on the line to make sure that history has a record of what's happening.
Indeed. And, you know, we never want to be part of the story. We want the civilians, the soldiers, the troops, Peter, to be the story that we're covering. But the tragedy here is that Brent Renaud became part of the story, and others are in danger every moment of every day. Peter, on a related subject, the president, according to NBC's Carol Lee and our colleagues at the White House, is considering a trip to the NATO, border states, to Poland, Romania, where the vice president has just returned, maybe Brussels. I don't know whether you think that would be a valuable, trip right now, especially after this breach with Poland over the MiGs.
Well, I think it would be a big symbol, obviously, to see the American president there on the ground in Eastern Europe would be, an important statement about American resolve and American commitment to its Eastern European NATO allies like Poland, like the Balts, like Romania, that feel very threatened by what's happening right now. And I think that, the presence of an American president always makes a difference, always, sends a statement to the world. And I think that would be a big deal if he decided to do that.